In the heart of a secluded forest, a group of friends embarked on their annual camping trip. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the eager adventurers arrived at their chosen camping site. The air was filled with an intoxicating mix of pine and damp earth, a familiar scent that brought a sense of comfort and nostalgia. They set to work, their practiced hands quickly erecting the tents and gathering wood for the fire. The crisp crackling of the firewood, the soft rustling of the leaves underfoot, the distant hoot of an owl, all of these sounds wove a symphony that was music to their ears. In this tranquil setting, they felt a million miles away from the hustle and bustle of their everyday lives. As the last tent was pitched, one of the friends, drawn by an inexplicable curiosity, strayed a little from the campsite. Amidst the undergrowth and damp earth, his eyes caught a glint of something unusual. Intrigued, he bent down to discover an odd, ancient-looking artifact half buried nearby. It was a peculiar object, its surface etched with strange symbols, its texture weathered by time and elements. An eerie aura seemed to surround it, casting a spell of fascination and unease. He brought it back to the campsite, the artifact now a centerpiece of their gathering. As they huddled around the fire, its flickering light danced on the artifact, making the strange symbols seem to come alive. The friends speculated about its origin, its purpose, and how it came to be in the middle of nowhere. The object of intrigue had set the tone for the evening, transforming their simple camping trip into an unexpected mystery. Yet as the night grew darker and the fires glowed dimmer, a sense of unease began to creep in. The artifact, once an object of fascination, now cast an ominous shadow over their joviality. Little did they know this unusual find was going to turn their joyful camping trip into a horrifying nightmare. As night fell, a sense of unease crept through the camp. The once vibrant chatter among our group of adventurers gradually dwindled, replaced by the whispering wind and the occasional crackling of the campfire. The inky darkness of the forest seemed to stretch infinitely, its edges blurred by the flickering firelight. Strange happenings began to punctuate the silence. A sudden rustling in the bushes, like a creature moving stealthily, seemed to echo throughout the campsite. No one dared to venture into the darkness to investigate, attributing the sound to a wandering forest creature, perhaps a rabbit or a fox. Then came the shadows, unexplained shifting forms that danced just beyond the reach of the firelight. They were fleeting, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a shiver down the spine. Again, the group dismissed them as tricks of the light, the fire casting strange patterns across the trees. A cold breeze swept through the campsite, making the fire flicker more violently. The shadows seemed to grow bolder, more defined. An eerie silence fell, the usual nocturnal chorus of the forest muted. This was not the tranquil silence of a peaceful night, but something heavy and foreboding. Then the noises, soft at first, like a faint whisper carried on the wind, then louder, closer, a guttural growl, the snapping of twigs, the rustle of leaves. The group huddled closer to the fire, eyes wide, hearts pounding, yet they held on to the notion that these were just the sounds of the forest at night, the nocturnal creatures going about their business. But deep down they felt a growing dread, a sense of being watched, of being not alone. As the fire gradually died down, the darkness seemed to close in, swallowing the last vestiges of comfort. The forest was alive, its nocturnal symphony a chilling soundtrack to their mounting fear. As they fell asleep under the starlit canopy, they were oblivious to the terror that the night was about to unleash. For in the heart of the forest, fear takes on a life of its own, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary and the familiar into the terrifying. In the dead of the night, a chilling scream echoed through the forest. The tranquility of the wilderness was shattered. The chilling silence of the night was replaced by a deafening silence, a silence that was as ominous as the scream itself. The campers were jolted awake, their hearts pounding in their chests. One of their own was missing. Where once there was the comforting presence of a friend, there was now only an empty sleeping bag, its owner gone without a trace. A sense of dread hung in the air, as palpable as the mist that clung to the forest floor. Panic started to spread among the group like wildfire. The calm, composed faces that once shared laughter and stories around the campfire were now masks of fear and uncertainty. They searched the nearby area, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, revealing nothing but the dense woodland and their own frightened reflections. Returning to the campsite, they found the missing camper's tent in disarray. Signs of a struggle were evident. The tent flap was torn, belongings scattered, and the ground outside bore the signs of a scuffle. The artifact they had found earlier that day, the object of their curiosity and fascination, was nowhere to be found. It was as if it had vanished into thin air. The dots started to connect in their minds, each realization more horrifying than the last. The artifact, the scream, the empty tent, the struggle, they were all pieces of a terrifying puzzle that was starting to take shape. The forest, once a place of adventure and camaraderie, was now a menacing entity, its shadows hiding unknown horrors. As the reality of their situation set in, the campers felt the weight of their isolation. The vastness of the wilderness around them seemed to close in. The once welcoming trees now felt like silent spectators to their plight. The chilling truth began to dawn on them. The haunting had begun. The realization hit them. They were not alone in this forest. Their camping trip had turned into a desperate fight for survival. No longer was this a simple outing in the woods, a fun-filled escapade amongst friends. Now it was a dire struggle against an unseen terror, an unrelenting horror that had turned their laughter into screams and their camaraderie into terror-infused solitude. With their missing friend still unaccounted for and the artifact's eerie presence ever looming, the group decided to take action. They rallied together, their determination hardened by fear and the shared desire to survive. They set off into the dense woodland, each step taken with cautious dread, their eyes constantly scanning the undergrowth for any signs of their friend or the shadowy figure that seemed to be stalking them. The forest seemed to breathe with them, its shadows deepening and contracting with every passing second. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig sent icy shivers down their spines. Their hearts pounded in their chest like war drums, matching the rhythm of their hasty steps. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the stillness. It was not the scream of a man, but something altogether different, something far more terrifying. In the midst of their search, the artifact would reappear. It was as if it had a mind of its own, turning up in places they had just searched, in places it shouldn't have been. It was a cruel game of cat and mouse, the artifact luring them deeper into the woods, into the heart of the terror. They were not just searching anymore. They were running, hiding, trying to stay one step ahead of the shadowy figure that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. The forest was no longer a beautiful sanctuary, but a monstrous labyrinth, its paths winding and twisting into endless circles of fright. Every passing moment, every unnerving incident only confirmed their growing fear. This was no ordinary camping trip. This was no ordinary forest. They were not alone. They were being hunted, and they knew it. In the chilling climax of their nightmare, the group confronts the horror they had unknowingly unleashed. The tension in the air is palpable, as heavy as the leaden clouds above. One of their own, thought lost to the darkness, emerges from the shadows. His eyes, wide with terror, tell a tale of unspeakable horrors. His voice, barely a whisper, carries the weight of a dreadful secret. The artifact they had innocently stumbled upon was not just an artifact. It was a seal, a lock holding back an ancient evil that had slumbered beneath the earth for centuries untold. He tells them of the curse, of the dark power they had unwittingly awakened. His words paint a terrifying picture of a malevolent force older than the forest itself, stirred from its eternal sleep. As he speaks, the trees seem to lean in closer, their branches creaking ominously in the wind. The very air feels thick with dread, each word a chilling echo in the silent forest. Driven by desperation and fear, they decide to rebury the artifact. With trembling hands and hearts pounding like war drums, they dig. The soil, once soft and yielding, now feels hard and unforgiving under their desperate efforts. But they persevere, driven by the faint hope of ending the nightmare they had stumbled into. Finally, the artifact is once again swallowed by the earth, hidden from sight. The forest, as if holding its breath, falls silent. The oppressive weight in the air seems to lift, the trees no longer looming but merely standing. As dawn broke, the forest was silent once more. But had they truly escaped the horror, or had they merely appeased it? For now. As dawn breaks, they believe the nightmare is over, the forest returning to its tranquil state, but the calm is deceptive. Suddenly, a cold wind sweeps across the clearing, chilling them to the bone. The ancient evil, now fully awakened, materializes before them. A formless shadow, a living darkness that seems to devour the early morning light. The group, though terrified, stands their ground. They had been ordinary campers, but now they were warriors in a supernatural battle, the fate of their world hanging in the balance. In a tense standoff, they faced the entity, their courage glowing like embers in the face of the all-consuming darkness. They used their wits, luring the entity towards the buried artifact. The forest seems to hold its breath, the air growing heavy with anticipation. With a final desperate effort, they manage to trap the entity back into the artifact. The shadow screams as it is sucked back into the unearthly relic, the sound echoing through the forest like a dying wind. With a final thud, they seal the artifact once again, burying it deep within the earth. Exhausted but victorious, they stand in the silent forest, their breaths misting in the cold morning air. They had survived the night, but the forest would forever hold their secret. The artifact was once again buried, waiting in silence for the next unsuspecting camper. As they leave the forest, they can't help but glance back, their eyes lingering on the mound of earth that hides the artifact. The forest stands silent and watchful, its secrets once again hidden within its depths.